Hello, I am Xarkun and this is World of Warships Legends. Today I want to talk about the Tier 7 Premium Japanese Battleship Kii. And you'll note that I am in a division with Hippers Don't Lie. Although that is primarily the reason why there is no game audio in this video. It's because his voice is all throughout this game. Mine is not, because I have my voice set to not be shared when I take captures from the PlayStation. So this is actually half the reason I don't division very often, because it sort of makes the game footage unusable if I have to mute it. I don't really like to do that, but I wanted to for this particular video because I think it's worth showing. So you'll just have to deal with the tones of my voice. And I was going to post a video from World of Warships PC instead today, but I decided against it because there's something wrong with I don't know if it's the frame rate quality when I record replays from WoW's PC. The image just looks a little bit too stuttery, and the game I had in mind, after looking at it again, I realized it wasn't actually something I wanted to show. But in the future, I think when I get another decent game in one of the new German battlecruisers, I might put it up anyway, despite the stuttery quality of the imagery. I don't know. We'll see. In any case, this video is about the Kii. Now, what is the Kii? Well, in short, it's basically an Amagi-class battleship, or I think more accurately, battle cruiser. It's got 10 16-inch guns like the Amagi. The only difference, really, is that I think these guns might be slightly more accurate, but their penetration, I think, is slightly worse. Frankly, I don't like them all that much. They remind me of, well, if you're familiar with the Nagato at Tier 6 and the Mutsu at Tier 5, you'll know that the Nagato's guns are pretty usable, even if the platform that they find themselves on is not all that great, or at least they're pretty usable now after the Nagato got buffed. They were honestly quite terrible before that, I thought. But the Mutsu, it's a down-tiered version of the Amagi, or not the Amagi, the Nagato, and its guns, still 16-inch guns like the Nagato's guns, are much less accurate, and the penetration is much less good, because I think the shells are like World War I era shells. They don't have the same sort of fuses as the shells you'd find on the Nagato. And I kind of think that's the same story here between the Amagi and the Kii, although the Kii doesn't have the benefit of being down-tiered. Perhaps the reason it gets less good guns, the Kii, than the Amagi, is because it gets torpedoes instead to compensate. But these torpedoes really are not compensation. They fire off the back of the ship, and they don't have really the best forward firing angles. Plus, they only have a 6-kilometer range. I think the Kii on PC, which is a Tier 8 ship, has torpedoes with a 10-kilometer range, and I wish that Wargaming had kept that longer range when adding this ship to the game, because it would make this ship more unique, and it would make the torpedoes more usable. As it stands, you have to get to essentially point-blank range, like you would in, say, the Tirpitz, or the Gneisenau, or the Odin, those German battleships with torpedoes. But those have something that the Kii does not, which is a very robust armor scheme. Now, I do believe the Kii has the same turtleback armor scheme as the Amagi has, and that turtleback can be useful at close ranges, at least on the Amagi. I'm not so sure on the Kii, but even if it is, the rest of the Kii's armor scheme is comparatively light relative to the German armor scheme. Not that it's terrible armor or anything, but it's certainly not the kind of armor you want to use in brawling situations. And yet, the Kii has those torpedoes, which you do want to use in a brawling scenario. So it's a bit of a conundrum with this ship. And frankly, I would not recommend buying it for 750,000 global XP. I think there are better choices in the store that you could spend your global XP on. And if you want a battleship, well, those better choices might be something like the Alabama or even something like the Odin if you want a brawler, because the Odin is a much more effective brawler. Nevertheless, I finally found a situation where I could use the Kii's torpedoes to great effect. Now, I've come around the western side of the map by the A-flank, gone around the Ring of Death, as I like to call it, and found a Riga and a Colorado. I did not know the Colorado was there. I thought I was just going one-on-one against the Riga, because up until this point, the Colorado had not been spotted. But no matter. The Colorado, he's just a Tier 6 battleship. Feel like maybe this wouldn't have gone so well against a Tier 7 battleship. You can see just how poor the torpedo angles are for firing forward. I do essentially have to give broadside to this Colorado in order to use them, but I'm able to launch them at the Colorado. He is not able to shoot back at me for whatever reason. The torpedoes aren't quite enough to take him out, but we've still got the Riga in front of us. Who do we shoot? Well, I'm not sure, but we need to keep ourselves angled against the Colorado so that we don't take any super punishing hits from him. He does get a nasty chunk into us, but we've got torpedoes on the other side, so we figure we'll use our guns to sink the Riga and send the rest of the torpedoes at the Colorado. We went from 16,000 damage before rounding that corner all the way up to 88,000 damage. So a lot of burst damage potential in this ship if you're able to find situations like this. The Riga's armor is able to bounce our shells there. We have no more torpedoes, so we're going to try to perform the drive-by hit. And the Riga goes down, so there are 2 ships sunk instantly. And just like that, this game is essentially over. My team has only lost 2 ships, whereas the enemy has lost basically their entire fleet. And I did 102,000 damage in a brawling scenario with that Colorado and Riga. And as I played the Kii subsequent to this game, that is the kind of thing I was trying to do with it. If you want a more longer to mid-range Japanese battleship that sort of excels at kiting and is just better, I would go with the Tech Tree Tier 7 battleship, the Amagi. I do think that ship is better than the Kii, and I think unless you have all the global XP ships you already want, then I would not recommend this particular ship for all the reasons I just said. Nevertheless, if you do want to go with this because you want to have a Japanese battleship with torpedoes that can kind of brawl, well, this is that ship. But you have to keep in mind, if you're going to buy it with that intention of brawling in your head, that it's not going to work out for you all of the time. This was sort of a special case where it did work out pretty well, mostly because we had 2 isolated ships, one a lower tier battleship than us and the other a cruiser, and really nobody else on the enemy team was able to support them with fire, so we weren't being focused by too many people, and that's why we were able to pull it off. Plus, there were no destroyers around, and therefore no torpedo threats. So those situations are not always going to be present in every game you play, and therefore you're not going to really be able to brawl with this ship in every game. It's not going to be a consistent thing. It's very situational. I suppose you could say the same thing about the German battleships, but at least they have turtleback armor and the like to prevent them from being citadeled so easily at close range. You can say the Kii does too, but I just don't think it's as well armored as those. Anyway, my overall rating on the Kii, fairly mediocre. I personally wouldn't pick it up as a global XP ship from the store. If I had the 750,000 global XP to spend, I would spend that on the Alabama, or the Odin, or the Atago, or something else. There are a lot of 750k global XP ships, even maybe the Paolo Emilio. Something different, something more fun. If you are going to spend the 750k global XP on the Kii, though, and there is nothing I can do to dissuade you from it, just expect to essentially get an Amagi that is perhaps not as good as the actual Amagi in terms of its guns, but an Amagi that also has torpedoes that sometimes you can use to do amusing things like I did in this game. Only the enemy Friesland is left. He has almost no health. It's just a matter of who is going to sink him, and hopefully, with this salvo, that'll be me. But no, because of the terrible Japanese dispersion that you occasionally get. Maybe the rear turrets of justice will do the trick? No. Teammates take out the Friesland, and the game ends. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this brief look at the Kii. Be sure to give the video a thumbs up before you go. Consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't already done that, and I will see you next time. Goodbye.